Well, hi folks, how are we going? So welcome to another post. Just come up to a nice location here today, overlooking the ocean. Beautiful spot, beautiful day. So today I thought I might talk about something of a controversial subject, and that is bullying. Now, I appreciate this is something that something I've thought about a lot. I appreciate it's something a lot of people may not. Might just squat down here. A lot of people may not. I don't know. Perhaps they avoid it. I'm not quite sure. But I'm certainly not saying I've got all the answers. And what I might say might be a little bit controversial as well. But we'll see how that goes, I guess, depending on what sort of comments we end up with. It's a pretty topical subject, I guess. It's in the media a lot. You hear a lot about it. So the first thing I did was I sent Dear Kevin onto Google to find a definition for me. There he is. Say hi, Kevin. Yeah, he's a bit quiet. Doesn't say much. So, hope you're able to see me okay here. I'm not sure how this is going to turn out on the video. A definition of bullying says it's seeking to harm, intimidate or coerce someone perceived as vulnerable. Seeking to harm, intimidate or coerce someone perceived as vulnerable. And there are various other terms associated with it, of course: persecute, oppress, torment, browbeat, domineer, subjugate, pressure, harass, all pretty much, words that we would normally associate with bullying and some of the things that happen with it. I'm not sure how this is going to go. Maybe that's a bit better. I've got my cheat sheet here today too, so just so I remember some things that I really want to say and I don't miss out on things I might want to talk about. So there are examples everywhere in the world, of course, of bullying. I see it all the time in workplaces and driving situations, social situations, the internet, of course, in relationships, especially personal relationships, and in positions of people in positions of power of various sorts. Obviously, we see quite a bit of bullying go on, and it's not just limited to the human world. Of course, you see it in the animal world a lot. I was watching some birds the other day. When I grew up on a farm, and we used to keep chooks or chickens for the international viewers. We call them chooks in Australia. We used to keep chooks, about 20 of them, and every now and again, for some reason, they'd just decide to pick on one chook. I don't know why they did. Never worked out why, but they used to do that, and they would basically peck it to death. They would chase it around the yard and peck it to death if we didn't intervene. Funnily enough, we'd take the chicken out, the poor victim out, and put it aside for a couple of days, put it back in with the flock, and it was fine. Don't know why that used to happen, but I've observed humans behaving in a very, very similar way at times. So I suppose part of the reason I'm talking about this is because obviously I've dealt with a fair bit of bullying myself. When I was in primary school, I got a lot of it, huge amounts, for years. And it made my life pretty much hell in primary school, in the latter years especially, and early high school, till I got big enough and started sort of, throwing a few fists around myself and ended up sort of putting one guy in hospital. And it quietened down a bit after that when people realised I was going to fight back. But obviously you realise that that's not the best way to deal with things either over time, of course. I used to go home to my mother, and especially in primary school, and I'd say, oh mum, they give me a hard time, and she'd just say, ignore it. Oh, just ignore it. That was her way of dealing with things. It didn't work for me, and I would strongly suggest it won't work for most people. Ignoring it doesn't necessarily go away. The people tend to keep doing what they do. Some people get great delight out of bullying other people. My stepfather was pretty authoritarian and did a bit of bullying in his own way, and so I'd get it at school, and then I'd get it at home as well, which wasn't always good. So when I first married and I had stepkids, guess what I did? Ended up being the authoritarian dad, and I found myself behaving the same way, and it was a real shock to the system when I realised that that's what I was doing. And I had to change. Fast forwarding a bit into life, I did teacher training some years ago as a mature age student and went off to my placement, as you do with those courses. I got a placement at a primary school, and they'd talk about bullying and, looking after the kids, and kids shouldn't bully each other, and they'd have all these lessons and discussions about it. And then I'd be sitting in the staff room at lunchtime, and I'd listen to staff members saying, oh yeah, she did this and he did that, and she did this and he did that, and I couldn't help but reflect on how hypocritical that was, that you're telling kids not to do it, but you're behaving essentially the same way yourself. So that really brings up issues of perception about what bullying is. I was reading a story in the media recently about US warships wanting to navigate through the South China Sea, freedom of navigation. And it was interesting that in the US was doing that, and the Chinese were calling the US, aggressive bullying tactics. I mean, it's kind of a case of the pot calling the kettle black there, isn't it? Either or. I mean, neither nation's exactly being without its bullying. Let's face it, probably no nation really has. But it's about perception. I remember being in workplaces, and sometimes I'd say things, and I'd find out later that person thought it was a really bullying statement that I'd made, and I'd think, it was often a shock. I often had to think, well, hang on, that wasn't my intention, or was it? Because a lot of this stuff comes out from the subconscious, of course, which is can be a pretty murky place. So I check my thing. So, what is bullying really about? Well, it's about power. Why does someone want power? Because they want to control the world around them. Now we get down to the really interesting bit. Why does someone want control of the world around them? There's only one word. Fear. When you boil it down to the behaviour, you take away all the rubbish, all the crap, clear away all the crap around it, you're left with fear. Simple as that. Almost every bullying type behaviour can come back to fear. Now, I'm not without, I've certainly have bullied at times myself. I have caught myself doing it. Usually not deliberately. Occasionally I have done it deliberately in certain situations. And I've had to really ask myself some hard questions about the role of power in my own life. I'm just going to flip through my other notes here. Yeah, it's really interesting when you realise your role in the bullying process, whether it's as the, I don't want to use the word victim really, I don't think that's a good word to use, but whether that's, giving or receiving of the bullying process. But for me, once I realised it's about fear, it really changed how I viewed it and how I perceived other people's behaviour in relation to it. It helped me understand and unravel a lot about my own behaviour and also about others' behaviour, and I still see, as I say, a lot of that in the world. So what do you do if you're experiencing bullying? Well, the first thing I'd say, and like I said, I haven't got all the answers here, but the first thing I'd definitely say is don't put up with it. You need to do something about it. It's important. Now, I admit that's not always easy, and I'm making a very general statement that could cover a whole variety of situations, but it is important that you don't allow yourself just to continue to stay in that situation. You need to remove yourself in some way or another. So I'd just like to finish with this. If you find yourself experiencing bullying, or indeed being a bully yourself and realising that you're doing it, or perhaps even more interesting, both, then ask yourself this question. What is my relationship with my own personal power in my life? The answers may well surprise you. Live well, stay happy. Bye for now.